Buddy. God has put in my heart to share this. I've been thinking a lot of time about sharing it or not, but I think that it's the right time. I want to clarify that this is something real. I have a real fear for the Lord, and I would not use His name in vain. I want to make clear that although this experience started when I was asleep, it was not a dream. I was taken in the spirit, and I saw my spirit man come back to my body, laying in my bed when I came back. So I went to sleep like normal. Sometime during this time, an angel came to pick me up. I was not allowed to remember this, but I know it happened because of what I will say. When I came to myself, I was in front of a black curtain or veil, as big as a wall. I looked to my left and to my right and saw the corner of this building and the columns between the veils. As a comment, I would like to say that this veil is what separates our world from the spiritual world. At that time, I asked in my mind, "Where are we going?" And the answer came into my head immediately: "We are going to see God." Then I asked, "Where is God?" I started to be lifted up from the ground slowly and constantly until I was above the veil, and I saw darkness, infinite darkness. Somehow, with my spiritual eyes, I was drawn to see ahead of me, and it was like billions of kilometers ahead of me. But even after those billions of kilometers, there was still just darkness. I had reached the limits of what the spiritual eye can see. Then, somehow, I focused on that I wanted to see further, and this time I could see with my spiritual mind. And in my mind, I saw at a distance a flat white planet or a city floating in the middle of the darkness. I wasn't near it, I was at a distance, but I could see it. And I don't know the size of it because there's nothing to compare it with because it's just floating there in this darkness. However, I knew that that was heaven and God was there. First, my mind came back to where my eyesight was, which was millions of kilometers to where I had started, or billions even, or billions of light years. And then, when my mind came back, then my eyesight pulled back. And I can tell you that there is no human machine, there is no human will where you can reach heaven. The distance is just so great. It's like, from here to the center of the universe. Like you can't even imagine the distances. So as my eyesight came back to its original position, I was still at the top of the rim of the black curtain, and I looked all around and I only saw darkness and infinite darkness below, above, to my right, to my left. As I was looking below, I became scared because I thought I might fall into the darkness. And I believe that this is the outer darkness that Jesus warned us about in Matthew 8:12. At that moment, I believe the presence who answered, "We are going to see God," sensed my fear and started to pull me down slowly. In the moment I started to go down, I looked downwards and I saw my spiritual body at the ground. I was wearing the same clothes I wore when I was in bed, a white shirt and black shorts. I realized it was only my sight that had gone up above the curtains. So my spiritual body was below, but somehow my sight was put above, and then my sight could reach further into the darkness, and then my mind reached even further. And there I could see in my mind, without seeing through my spiritual eyes, heaven. On my way down, I looked to my right, and we can look here, and then there's a peripheral vision. We cannot see any further behind me. So, but when I was up, I could see that in that position there was an angel dressed in white, and because I couldn't see it originally, because he was behind my peripheral vision, I thought that he was hiding. So I thought, why is he hiding? And then again, the message came instantly to my mind: he is not hiding. And I know now, that God has established the right hand as a place of honor for himself or for anybody representing him. In this case, the angels, he might not want us to remember seeing them or their faces because people can become idolaters because they have a glory. Um, they have their own glory, and I've seen a lot of people fall in this mistake, praying to angels or speaking to angels, and we must not do that. They're just servants, like us, of God, and we should only pray to God. So as I kept coming down, uh, my side and my body joined again. So I was one, and I started walking around this building, and I wanted to remember every detail. I know that it was a special occasion, and I wanted to remember everything. And it looked like a normal warehouse with columns, and there were even lights hanging from the ceiling, but there was no ceiling. It was only darkness. The floor was poured concrete. There was nothing on top of it, no like wooden floor or anything. It was just like gray poured concrete. And I could feel it because I was barefoot. I didn't feel it was cold, but I could feel that it was hard. And I was walking around for like 2 minutes. And I have to say this as a side note, is that in the spiritual body, you can bend, jump, run, but your clothes won't show more skin. They are flexible, so if you lift this arm, it's flexible. You can lift it and the clothes will move, but it will not open and show more skin, or it will not show your legs, or you will not, and I'm sorry, your butt crack, it will not show. It's just made so that you preserve your honor, let's say. So there I was walking in this warehouse when suddenly I was no longer in the warehouse. I was somewhere else. There was a person right in front of me, and this person just moved to the right. Like when you are in the cashier, or taking out money from this cash machines, and there's a person in front, and when they're done with their business, they just move to the right and you move forward. The same thing happened. The person moved to the right, and I involuntarily took 2 steps forward. I didn't decide to take them. I took them. And I looked to my left, and there were like 4 or 5 people standing there. The same way as I was standing, they were standing, but they were just looking up. And one thing that immediately shocked me, and it was like a culture shock, is that nobody looked at me. Nobody acknowledged me. It's normal human behavior that when you walk into a room, people look at you. It doesn't matter who you are. People will tend to like quickly look at you and then go back to their business. But here, no one cared that I was there. They were just transfixed, and they were just looking ahead. The guy on the left was just like this and serious all the time, that he was just doing that. And I think that this, like I've said in my previous videos, everything that we see in God's vision or dreams or in the spirit is made with purpose. Everything God is trying to teach us all the time, and he was trying to teach me humbleness, because there's one truth, and the truth is that only God matters. The only value we have is the value that God has given us, but in reality, everything exists because of God. Only he matters, and sometimes we forget this and we're not humble. So God was trying to teach me, and I think that's why I came in through also a warehouse. He was just trying to teach me humbleness. I have had before pride problems, and God is always trying to teach us. So the first man to my left looked like Mediterranean or Middle Eastern man. He was shorter and thinner. It looked like somebody maybe had worked on farmland. He was around 40 to 60 years old. He was wearing a red checkered pattern long sleeve shirt, like what they call lumber shirts. And I thought to myself, if that was his pajama, because they're pajamas that look like lumber shirts, and if he had also been taken while he was asleep, or if that was his dress shirt. So I didn't know why they were there. We were all standing on a platform of a balcony, but without rail protection. And we were above the ground, maybe the equivalent to 3 or 4 stories, or 3 or 4 floors, I think you call it. As I looked down where I was standing, and in front of me, I saw round nails. I saw huge toes and sandals, and the nails of the toes were perfectly trimmed, and round nails. I knew it was God, so I quickly lifted my head and saw his legs. He was wearing his robe, his like white robe covering him completely, except the toes. And he was sitting like this, on a huge throne. And I wanted to look at his face, but I couldn't. I had to just stop at the shoulder level. I wasn't allowed to look at his face, and honestly, I am very thankful that God did not let me look at his face. And the reason is, um, when you see God's face, or it's like it's something visual, but in reality, it's something spiritual. You have a revelation, a complete revelation of who He is, or a greater revelation of who He is. So that's why it says nobody can live after seeing God's face, because nobody can be in this earth after seeing God's face, because then when you sin with a greater knowledge, and that is worse actually, and that's the reason. And I said on the other videos, that's the reason the punishment for the devil is so great, because he was the light bearer. He was in front of God. He knew God. He saw Him, completely. He had a complete revelation of who He is, and still he sinned. Being perfect, he sinned, and also knowing who God is. So, what grace can cover that? He needs to be judged. So I'm thankful I didn't see His face, because I came back to the earth, and actually I became later, even though I had this experience, backslider is what you call it. So I'm happy God in His mercy, He didn't show me His face, because I would have a greater revelation who He is. And I don't know, people say that God's grace covers everything, but I wouldn't want to try it. So there was this distance, between where I was standing and where God was standing. There was a big distance also. I don't know how much, but it could be like, let's say like 100 meters or 150 meters. It would be hard to calculate the distance. I thought to myself, I need to remember everything. So I looked around and tried to see on the ground if I could see where the Bible says that there's elders kneeling with crowns and giving their crowns to God, but there was nobody. I tried to see if I could see, like, there was this, the Bible and Revelations describes this like water on the ground, basically a screen, but we would call a screen now, that shows things, but I didn't see anything. I didn't see actually anybody else except God and the people to my left. Now I felt and I knew, because there's some sort of knowing, that the angel that had brought me was still to my right, but I couldn't see to my right. So I wasn't allowed to see to my right, and I wasn't allowed to see above God's face. I was only allowed to see in front of me and to my left. And to my left, I saw some columns that went all the way from the ground floor all the way to the roof. But again, there was no roof. It was just the columns. So I wanted to remember all the details. And somehow my eyesight, again, detached from this spiritual body, and I came to behind me. So I was seeing like this. I see myself in front, and the 4 or 5 people here next to me. And I was, through my eyesight, seeing this way. So I could see everything I could. As I was looking at everything, I started seeing myself crying. And I thought to myself, why am I crying? And so my sight went back into my body, and I said something I still regret to this day. I said to God, in the mind, if you did not like the way I was, why did you make me this way? Because you see, I was an atheist at the age of 5 until God appeared to me in a dream, and He was angry at me at the age of 17, and I became a Christian 2 years later at the age of 19. So I was blaming Him for making me in a way that I became an atheist. And we do that many times. We say we're born this way to justify ourselves, when in reality God made us and predestined us with a good purpose. But our bad choices in life and the evil of the world makes us deviate from this. Even Adam blamed God for Eve and blamed him for his reason of sinning. It is something that we commonly do. So back to this experiences. As soon as I finished saying, why did you make me this way? And the way, I felt God move His head like this and signaling, like taking back. I don't know if He was signaling to the angel, taking back, or that He made me go back with just this move in His head. And I immediately left His presence I was thrown to the right. And I saw all the dimensions. They were like compressed, so instead of like experiencing each dimension, it was like pages of a book, and I just crossed all of them, and I could see all of them. And I also felt as soon as I left, that God's answer was right behind me, you know? So I was an object traveling through these dimensions, and God's answer to, my question was also a solid object. And as I was moving forward, the object was just following me. But all this happened immediately, in nothing. So I crossed all these dimensions in milliseconds or immediately, and just at the last moment, I was just floating above my physical body, going down, and I thought, this is going to hurt because I was thinking, when I come back to my body, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't a dream. I went in the spirit. I saw my body laying in bed, and I thought it was gonna hurt. And I went into my body, but it didn't hurt. But I knew God's answer was just right behind me. So when I got into the body, then His answer hit me, and it was soft. It didn't hurt me, but it was like a physical object. And His answer was not made of words, but I understood His answer. And the best way I could explain it with words was, stop your childish crying, or stop your tantrum, because you see, I was crying. And I need to say this. The reason I was crying is because I was scared. Because when you are in front of God and you see perfection, you see the mold that Jesus says, be holy like God is holy. And you see inward to yourself, and you see how sinful you are, and all the wickedness and darkness there is in the human heart, you are scared. And I will tell you this, and this is the reason I'm saying this, is because when you are with God, in front of God in the throne, when you die, your mom will not be there, your pastor will not be there, your priest will not be there, your shama will not be there. Nobody is there. The people on the left, they didn't care about me. They only cared about themselves and God. The angel to my right, if God would have told them, take him to hell right now, he would have taken me to hell without asking any questions. He wouldn't bat an eye. He's just doing what God has ordered him to do. And the only thing that mattered was my relationship with God right there, and I was lacking. And I know I'm still lacking. So be scared. I was very afraid of God, and it's okay to be scared of God. A lot of people try to say, oh, it's not okay to fear God. It's like respect you have. No, it's a real fear that you need to have God. And that fear has to be so great that everything else in comparison seems little. So the fear that you have towards the spiritual world and the devil is nothing compared to the fear you have to God. The fear that you have to humans and the rejection they have when you preach the gospel has nothing in comparison to the fear that you have from God. And there is a real fear because there is an outer darkness. I saw it. You don't want to fall there. I didn't want to fall there. It felt like if you can fall endlessly. So just imagine, to give you perspective, that you are floating in the middle of the ocean. There is absolutely no lights, nothing. You cannot even see what's behind. It's just darkness. Instead of a clear sky at night where you can see stars, there's no sky. It's just darkness, and below is darkness, and you're just there alone, and there's nobody with you. That is kind of the feeling that I got, that would be falling into this outer darkness, just terror, basically. So after this happened, I woke up and it was morning. It had taken me some time from the moment I got picked up to the moment I got in the warehouse, and I walked around this warehouse or waiting room, and the time that I got into the throne room. But it took God no time to throw me back into my body, It's just the way it is. It's basically, the warehouse, I believe, was like a waiting room. When the person in front of me was done, I presented myself in the throne room. This person moves to the right, and then I go forward. And I think this is how it's going to be in Judgment Day. So I pray to everybody that you sanctify yourselves, that you do not use an excuse that I was made this way. There's a lot of people in the homosexual community especially that are saying I was made this way, and you were not made this way. I was an atheist at 5, I could have argued I was made this way. It's not true. I chose to be an atheist at 5. I was tricked by the devil, and that's another video I'm going to do in the story about it. I was tricked by the devil, but I was not made by God an atheist, and you were not made by God a homosexual or a pedophile or a liar or a deceiver or a blasphemer or an adulterer. You were not made those things. All those things are equally as bad, If you're judging, I will say this, if you're judging other people for the way of life, but you yourself are lying, you need to take that thing off your eye. You need to clean yourself. Because When you're in front of God, there is no excuse. He sees everything, everything you've ever done, everything you are. He sees through you. You are basically you're wearing clothes because he likes to, you know, keep you in this dignity. But he sees through you. God bless you, and I hope this is a blessing for more people.